Welcome to the Beyond Physio podcast. I'm Dr. Jerry Yu, CEO and founder of Next Level Physio. Today, I have Sayward Grindley on my show. Welcome, Sayward.
Thank you.
And Sayward is an expert in dance. And I wanted to share with our audience because we've had a lot of dancers come through our doors. And it would be really good to share from Sayward's perspective the sacrifices she's made, the successes she's had in the career, and all the kinds of transitions she's had to go through in life to make it happen for her and to get to the level that she's been at. Welcome to the Beyond Physio podcast, where we help you move, excel, and inspire others on your journey to your next level with knowledge and advice from experts and testimonials from our like-minded community. So, Sayward, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear about how you got involved in dance. I believe you started at a young age, and let's talk about that journey for you.
Yeah, I started when I was little, just at a regular studio. My mom put me in it because I was dancing up and down the grocery store aisles, and I was super shy. And so I think she thought, all right, she seems a little bit more comfortable movement-wise than speaking, so maybe this is a place that she'll feel comfortable. And it definitely was. I was always more comfortable with movement than with speaking in front of people. So it was definitely something that I knew right away that I enjoyed. I was not talented in the beginning. So it definitely took some time to kind of get through some of those awkward years. But I was a kid that would ask to stay and watch other classes or stay and watch the entire recital, even if I wasn't in it. And my mom would just sit there and let me watch for hours and hours. And it was like I could just absorb things from observation. And so that was a lot, I think, of my learning as a young child. Even if it didn't register in the body yet, I was taking all that information in.
That's pretty amazing.
For sure, yeah. I think when I got to high school is when I figured out that I really kind of wanted to do this more seriously. And even my high school was really great in working with me. They did not have a dance program, and so they worked with the university nearby to do dual enrollment so that I could take the college level classes as a high school student. So I would leave school early and go over to the college and start taking those classes.
So they saw something inside of you at that time that they wanted to actually help nurture as well, Sayward, is that right?
Yes, I had a wonderful school with guidance counselors that really encouraged us to find where our passion and our interests were and to kind of guide our curriculum around that. And I think that was something that stuck with me as a teacher moving forward. And my dad was a college professor in physics in the science world, but he was always that sort of teacher as well to really mentor his students and say, all right, well, what's going to be in the best interest of you, and that each student has a different pathway, and that's okay.
That's so cool. You know, it's funny because a lot of dancers that we treated in the past also started at a young age, and at some point, something clicked for either the instructor or for the dancer. And it sounds like you had the same sort of moment. Some people were seeing something about you that was something that needed to be grown. And it's so important, I think, for that for younger dancers and athletes in general to have the right mentors and coaches and people who can see that thing. Do you think that things have changed over time, Sayward, where maybe there's less of that? Or do you think it's still as good as it was back when you were a young aspiring dancer?
I think there's actually more of it now, more understanding that dance doesn't have to be all or nothing, that you can really combine it with your other interests and other career or content areas. There's a lot more, I think, acceptance in double majoring in dance and something else and finding the crossover and where there's curricular connections between the two things. So I think when I was in college, that was not as common. I was actually the first person at my university to do dance performance and dance education. And I was very adamant that, yes, I want to perform, but I also want this education training. And that's really super important to me, not just to be an expert in dancing that decides to teach, but I want to be an expert in teaching as well. And it's a completely different craft and understanding. And I wanted to make sure that I had all of those tools, because there used to be this saying, those who can't do, teach. And I do not believe in that, and believe that teaching is really something that has to be mastered as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I always felt that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the better a student you are, and the better that you are teaching, the better you can convey the information or the techniques or what have you, that information education to students so they can actually better understand that. And because so many kids, so many adults learn things differently, being able to teach that effectively across different ways of learning is really, really important.
Yes, for sure. And like you said, everybody learns differently. There's so many different ways of taking in information, and I've done a lot of research in the last few years on that, and especially with neurodiversity and ways that people process information differently. And if we as teachers kind of understand that a little bit better and understand, development and child psychology and how the brain works and how information can be taken in and repeated back out, then we do a better job of setting up our students for success.
Yeah. It's funny. In grad school, I discovered that it took me a long time to get there, but I realized I'm definitely more of a kinesthetic learner than I expected.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself as I'm talking to you, Sayward, that, wow, I wish I had someone like Sayward back in the day who could identify that and create the right environments or the right kinds of ways for me to learn that way. Because I think I would have done even better in different subject materials because I could interact with whatever that sort of topic was instead of just trying to learn it rote.
Right.
But
make it more accessible for you. And yeah.
Exactly. Now, as far as your dance interests, Sayward, did it evolve as far as, did you sort of stick with one form of dance, or did you sort of evolve in different areas and get a wide exposure to different things?
Definitely a wide range. So I had done a lot of different forms while I was growing up. And then when I went to college, I went to a wonderful program, East Carolina University, that really encouraged well-roundedness. And even though as a dance performance major, I had to pick a style. So ballet was my concentration and I had a ballet scholarship, but I really had very, very good training in modern dance and jazz and just a lot of opportunities that not every college was giving at that time. So at that time, most universities, you had to pick one thing, and that was really what you studied, and that was sort of all you were set up to do. And I loved ECU's program that they really created these well-rounded dancers, and I felt confident with choreography, with improvisation, with teaching, with research and dance history and writing about dance, and then even the production aspects. We took a lot of courses in lighting and costume design and set design and stage management and theater management and how to set up a budget. And, there just were so many courses that I think were really beneficial to me in seeing that there were lots of other opportunities in the dance field besides what we typically think of just being on stage. And there's so much more out there that I want my students to know about too, that that dance can take us in so many different directions.
Yeah. And we talked about before in our conversations how, because you have such a diverse background training, a lot of dancers do, and education, it allows you to do things in quote unquote real life that people might not expect, like the way you're able to multitask effectively, the way you're able to take on different tasks and be very organized and whatnot. Definitely skill sets that you wouldn't necessarily think of as dancers per se, but that was actually very surprising, pleasantly.
Yeah. In my most recent position, I was working for the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. So as an education consultant in arts education. And so I oversaw all of the dance and visual arts for the entire state, K through 12 public schools. And that included over 7,000 teachers, 180 district arts leaders, and creating professional development for teachers and teacher training. So how to teach more effectively, how to sustain yourself and your own practice through your teaching. And that included arts teachers, but also other academic subjects would take a lot of our courses because they would find ways to make it relevant to what they were teaching as well. But I think where you were talking about was specifically with setting up these big professional development days, and from start to finish, 8 hours of different sessions that teachers, professionals could go take, and then big group workshops all together. For instance, I do a movement workshop that talks about leadership skills. And so we do a lot of mirroring and leading and following and movement leadership. But then we kind of tap into, okay, what are those skills that we needed to be an effective leader? We had to be aware that our followers are following us, and we obviously want to set them up for success. And we don't want to do something that's going to surprise them or jar them or make them startled or uncomfortable. So being aware that there are people who are following us and looking up to us, and how do we set them up to be the most successful they can be. And then as a follower, knowing that, yes, I'm following this person, but I'm also going to do what's safe for my body. And if they're doing something that I know is not appropriate or I'm not ready for, how do I modify that and make it so that it is correct and it fits on me and my body? And so we would talk about that movement wise, and then tap in, because a lot of those teachers were not dance teachers. I had theater teachers, visual art teachers, music teachers. I had people who worked in community arts centers that work with the schools in different capacities. I had principals. So then we would tap into, all right, you just stepped out of your comfort zone to experience this movement exercise. How can you connect that to your job and how you're leading people in your school, or how you're leading your students or other teachers in your community? And really seeing that insight was fantastic, and how they can make those connections from tapping into something movement-wise that they might have not thought of previously. So those are some of the things that I would do, and set up full events that I would think of as like setting up a production and thinking about it from start to finish and all the aspects that go into that.
I think, I'm even more fascinated by what you do, which is, thank you for sharing this, really. And I think of just in our field how, people might come in with the same kind of issues. Hey, come with low back pain, whatever. But like you said, everybody presents so differently, Sayward, because there's a high, obviously, level of individuality. And everyone's had different stressors in life. They've had different experiences, different kinds of traumas. And as a result, we can't just say, okay, we're going to like press here and do that. We have to really be careful as physical therapists, which is what we try to do at Next Level, to make sure that the care is very individualized to the person. Some of the dance backgrounds can be very different from somebody with a football background, somebody from a sedentary background. And we have to adjust the programs accordingly. And like you said, making sure that the person understands that, hey, this is the movement repertoire you have right now, but we're going to try to expand that past your comfort zone, as you said, but in a way that's going to be meaningful to you, in a way that's going to be work for you, so that you don't get hurt trying to do that, or you don't feel worse trying to do those things.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of parallel there.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I feel like dance and physical therapy go such hand in hand, and there's so many similarities that I do in my practice when teaching, especially when I'm teaching adults or college students. Really trying to tap into, how is this going to benefit you for the rest of your life? Yes. So a lot of people that I'm teaching are not training to be professional dancers. So what is the benefit that it's going to do for them?
Yes.
Hopefully it's going to give them range of motion, make them feel really good, give them movement, get those endorphins going. But also just to be aware of what their body can do and be more bodily aware and comfortable with themselves and honest with themselves. There's just so many benefits that can continue through a lifetime if it's approached in the right way.
Absolutely, yeah. And I have worked in places back in my early days in a career where it was just really just about like shake and bake PT.
Yeah.
And it's just, okay, we're just gonna like put a little hot pack, cold pack on you, and then we'll do a little whatever it is, and everything was very cookie cutter. And one of the things I just got tired of was just that cookie cutter approach where everybody's so different. How can we really say that we can treat every shoulder issue with this way of doing things, with every knee, every hip kind of thing coming in? And I love the longevity aspect, because that's really what it comes down to for us, is how can we create the most movement options for this person based on what they want to do in life, what they want to get back to, what they're capable of doing, and can we create the right program so that they can continue doing what they love to do, or even just get off the couch for that matter, so they can live life differently, get out of their comfort zone again. But these are the things that go through my mind as a clinician and practitioner, is that I just want to make sure that this person can live a fulfilled life and not feel limited, not feel like they can't do something, and give them the right kinds of tools through exercise, through manual therapy, through everything that we do here, so that they can get to where they want to be.
Yeah, definitely. And I will add to that. So many years ago, I had a really bad foot injury, just slipping on a step in between classes, but it ended up putting me out of dancing for almost a year. And I was on crutches and had surgery and all of this and went through a lot of physiotherapy. And I really connected with a lot of those exercises that I was given for foot strength and stability. I had previously just kind of happened to have really great dancer feet. So I'd never really had to work through a lot of those things because it was just sort of my feet were the only like natural thing that I had. And in order to get that back, I really had to concentrate hard on working those tiny, tiny little intrinsic muscles. And a lot of those exercises I kept throughout and I continued to do. So that was back in 2008. So it's been a while. And I actually utilize a lot of those in my pre-point classes and point classes with younger dancers and I explain to them, these are really important for you to do ongoing, whether you're going to put point shoes on or not, because your feet are the primary source of your dancing ability, right? And they're your foundation. And so if they're not strong, if they're not stable, if they're not able to spread out and really feel the floor and roll through and articulate, yes, then you're going to end up getting more injuries later on. So let's start working through those things now and teaching them how to really warm up their feet even before they have an official warm up. And so what kinds of things can they be doing or in between dances at competitions? You know, if you have a 10-minute break, what's something that you can do really quickly to make sure that your feet are staying warm and staying in good shape so that you don't run out there and re-injure something because they're not warm enough.
Right.
And then even how to take care of their feet after a long dance day and what they can do when they come home to sort of settle everything, and teaching them like some self-massage and that sort of thing. So I really found that was the biggest point I think that PT had in my life at that time.
Yeah.
And I learned over the years to always take those exercises and keep them in my repertoire and in my back pocket so that I start to notice, you know, my hip exercises, you know, my hips bothering me. So which exercises can I pull out to kind of prevent that from getting worse?
Yeah.
And then those exercises that I can also incorporate into the dance classroom itself and utilize in their dance training right off the bat so that they're learning those rather than having to go much later when they're already injured and retrain everything, but they already have it in their muscle memory.
You just blew my mind because there's so many things that you said that I have to unpack.
Yeah.
The first thing is that you just directly apply what we talked about with the seminars we've done, where how do we apply what I've learned into my profession?
Mm-hmm.
You've carried that to the nth degree, which is amazing. Your level of compliance, and one of the things I really love about working with dancers is they will 9.999 times out of 10, maybe even 11 out of 10, they will do what you ask them to do.
Yes.
And they'll do it really well to the point where they'll ask, well, how else can I vary this? And I'm like, oh my God, I wish I had more patients like this. So dancers are a pleasure to work with, just for that matter itself. They really are serious about getting better at these things because they know their livelihood depends on how well they can move in space. Mm-hmm. And so it actually, for me, it takes me sometimes out of my comfort zone and my usual way of things, sort of algorithm doing things, because I'm like, oh, wait, we have to actually adapt this a little differently because even though she's a dancer, her needs are very different from the last dancer that we saw because of what the type of dance that she's involved in, what she has to do to perform in her show. So it's actually stretched me too clinically over the last 20 years to be able to accommodate different kinds of things to make sure that the goal is still being met, but it's across a different domain in that dancer's repertoire.
Yeah.
So it's amazing.
Yeah.
And I love that you taught your people on how to do those things too.
Yeah.
You know, the value actually too in just working with dancers is that they are committed to making sure that they are healthy in other ways as well. Can you talk about other ways that dancers have to be mindful of their health in general to make sure they can perform at the very best? Because I've heard stories over the years of ballet dancers having to not eat, and there's like some eating disorder issues there too. But How do you teach your dancers as far as keeping up other healthy habits so they don't fall into different traps that come along the way of being in dance?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that risk with depending on how the environment is that the dancer is in, or the training, or even the company. You know, if it's coming down from a higher level that, hey, you have to be a certain size, or you have to look a certain way, or fit into a certain costume, there is always that risk that it can damage someone psychologically and end up triggering really difficult habits. Or eating disorders. And sometimes they don't even realize they're going through that until years later when they're out of that environment. Um, but I will say in my teaching, I just talk about being as healthy as you can.
Yeah.
And I don't want dancers to restrict anything. We don't ever talk about like you have to look or be a certain way, because I thoroughly believe every body can dance no matter what. So to me, there is no dancer's body, because everybody has a dancer's body. If you have a body, you have a dancer's body. Like, so to me, it is completely irrelevant. But what's going to make the most sense, again, for you individually as a dancer? Are you wanting to do something that's more somatic and just makes you feel really good? What do you need to fuel that, versus if you're doing something that's really aerobic and high energy, what do you need to be able to sustain you in that? And if you're feeling like you're getting fatigued very quickly, then maybe you need to add extra snacks, extra protein, extra water. What are the things that you need to add in? But I never, ever talk about restricting anything with students. I never talk about body type with them. I want them to feel very confident in what their bodies are capable of, and I never want them to have a negative connotation with them. So another workshop that I have presented around this state is the language that we use with our bodies and with our students and with our dancers, if we're a choreographer, and shifting things to a positive connotation instead of negative. So even telling yourself, oh, I should have blah, 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 or I need to fix blah, blah, blah. How do you reframe that and shift it to a positive connotation? So I even did this. I did a mini version of this workshop with a group of moms. So there's a group in town that I was a part of when I was had a new baby. That's moms of preschoolers. And there were about 40 moms there. And so I shifted. I said, think of something that you think you're too much of, or that somebody has told you you're too much of, or you feel that. And how do you shift that to make it a positive thing? So instead of, I'm overbearing, maybe I have great attention to detail. So how do you shift something that you may have thought was something negative and make it into a positive? And so that was how I started that workshop movement-wise. Instead of saying to students, don't stick your butt out or whatever it is, can you rephrase it to lengthen the spine and talk about the positive thing that needs to be done rather than the negative? And I think that's important for us to speak to ourselves in that way. And that's how I speak to my students. So I do that even with being healthy. I never say, don't do this or don't do this. I shift it to make sure you're drinking enough water, make sure you're getting enough protein, right? What are the positive things I can tell them so that they're not having that negative input constantly? And one thing I learned researching some of that with educators and even parents teaching their own children is you can hear a negative one time, but you have to hear a positive 6 times to balance that out.
It's crazy.
So giving yourself 6 positives for every negative you tell yourself is the only way you're going to even be neutral. Or for a teacher giving a student, right? If you're giving a student corrections and you're saying it in a negative way, you've got to give them 6 positives for every negative correction you give them. And so I really have shifted the way that I give corrections, and how can I explain it in a way that feels like a positive movement analogy rather than a negative movement analogy.
I love that. And you touched a big part in communication, and it's so invaluable for clinicians in our field to also to spin that positively, because a lot of times we have clients who have these chronic issues, and if we continue to support that negative self-talk, they're never going to really quote unquote get better, because they always have that seed of negativity that's been planted, and they keep feeding that and nurturing that. Rather, we will try to give them, hey, listen, you're not there yet, but here are the good things that we've seen so far. And look at how far you've come since 3 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago. It's like, let's take a note of that and like do a quick inventory, because we have to make sure that you see that you have objectively become better at what you do. And you're not quite there yet, but we're on the right path and you're doing the right things. And for them, it's like that, the eyes light up. I'm like, you're absolutely right. Do you remember when you first came, you couldn't lift your arm? Oh yeah, I did remember that, Dr. Jiri. Yeah, so those are the kinds of things that we really, I think is the biggest part of physical therapy is the right way to communicate, for sure. And I think we try to place a lot of value of that in our field, but I see that you're doing too. And again, like that mirroring of physical therapy and dance instruction is so valuable.
Yeah, there was a teacher, great mentor, educator in the field of dance, Bill Evans, and I did a long workshop with him, and he's in his 70s and still dancing and teaching and moving and talking about that longevity of dancers. And that was really what inspired me for that positive language connotation research. And he would say things like, instead of waking up in the morning and going, oh, my back hurts so bad, I can't move, and man, this back, I'm so mad at it, right? Find another way to say, my back could really use some extra attention today, right? So even how we phrase it ourselves can put a different spin on how it then feels and how we relate to that injury even. And so I really have tried to process that through my own on and off injuries.
Definitely myself too. I feel like, and some people have, it's almost like they've used that as their part of their identity.
Yeah.
And they use that as special, almost they want to stay in pain because it's identified them as somebody who's got this thing that they're carrying around with. And not a badge of honor, but there's something about that that's not actually a really positive association.
Right. Yeah. And I do think it's important to be honest with yourself and say, like, these are the limitations I have, especially in the dance field where we compare ourselves so much. I mean, I think in any sports field we're comparing, right? We all want to get better, or we want to be like the next person. So trying to remind ourselves that, hey, my hip sockets are not built to rotate 180 degrees where that dancer's might, but that's okay. So how do I work within my range of motion? Yeah. And so I do think that the honesty with where your limitations are great, but how do we put that in a positive? Well, I might not be able to do that, but I can do this instead. Yeah. And so where do we find that those limitations are not necessarily hurdles, but just acceptances of they're what make us unique, and it's not a deficit, it's just a uniqueness that I have. So shifting that as well, but being honest with, this is what I have, this is my facility, this is what I know that I'm able to work with, and then how do I make that the best that I can be?
I'm so glad you said that, and I wish, and I hope that some parents who are listening to this, because I know that there are a lot of kids and families have aspirations for their kids to be at certain levels in every kind of way. And I think sometimes there is, I'm not going to say denial, but maybe there is this over-identification with that particular goal or result in mind. Mm-hmm. And when it's not met, it could be really shattering. But like you said, it's like, that might be the right path for so-and-so. Mm-hmm. This is where my child is at. And this is what I can do with my child. This is where my child can go. And let's just push and help encourage that as much as we can, recognizing that's like you said, that's their domain. And I think if parents and kids out there really kind of took that in, I think they'd be happier, like you said, accepting who they are and working within those constraints.
Right. Yeah. I'm actually doing some private lessons with students who are nationally recognized athletes in other fields, and they're wanting to do ballet to really help hone in on some of their somatic awareness, and they're realizing that it's increasing their development in their other sports areas. And so these are high school students getting ready for college programs and college scholarships, and they're seeing that benefit of the cross training and the understanding of the body through the dance training that really balances and supports their other interests.
That is so cool. And, it's funny because we see a lot of athletes, and off the top of my head, I'm always thinking about cross training as doing something other than the sport. And I'm glad we talked today because it reminded me that I need to actually encourage more of our athletes to, hey, if you really want to get a good grounding of your body and understanding of it, there's no better way than doing dance.
Mm-hmm.
My gosh, the tension emphasis you have to do for the articulations
Yeah.
itself, really, really amazing. And I would say really kind of helps to downregulate the nervous system to help it sort of seek another way to acquire movement in a way it never has done before, because those circuits always lit up for lacrosse, for football, for all these other sports. But now when you add in dance, it's like a whole different experience that can really add layers to the movements available to those athletes to begin with.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny to me, a previous physical therapist that I saw, there was the main physical therapist, and then there was a student in training. And they just, even though I was in pain and I was just wanting to get better, they thought it was so fun to see what exercises I could do that they had in their back pocket. Just be like, oh, well, let's have her try this one. And when all the other PTs would come around and watch, like, oh my gosh, she's able to do that one.
So funny.
And I'm like, can we please just work on the injury? But it was like they just wanted to use me as an example to see which ones they could try that they haven't been able to figure out on other people, because there's so many like small, tiny movements that are sometimes really hard for people to get. And I think as dancers, we're just trained to really understand those tiny little details. Yeah. So it was always very humorous for me.
That's awesome.
Okay, I'm glad I'm here to entertain you.
Let's go into that. We've talked a little bit before about some of the common injuries we've seen across the lifespan of a dancer. I've seen, I'd say, more back and hip issues than in other populations of athletes that we work with. What are some things that you've either personally dealt with, Sayward, or have seen in many dancers along your journey as well?
Yeah, I have been dealing with on and off back injuries for 20 years now, and it's just something that I know I have to deal with, and it creeps up, and it gets to a point where then my body says, okay, you have to stop, you have to take a break, you need to get this under control, and then get it back to where it needs to be. So it's definitely been waves throughout my career where it's hindered quite a bit, but it's also when I make sure I'm paying attention to it and doing what I need to, it's something that I am able to work with and through. And yeah, it's tricky, and definitely the hip issues kind of come into play with that as well. Early arthritis starts to build up. I've had a lot of friends and colleagues that had to have, hip resurfacing or even hip replacements early on, like in their early 40s, late 30s, which is really young to have to do a lot of that. And I think where a lot of that comes from is overtraining early on, and teachers that don't necessarily understand fully, like we talked about, the whole aspect of training that includes development, mind and body, where that student is developmentally at that point. If they haven't hit puberty yet and they're doing a lot of certain exercises that, because their muscles are just a little bit more relaxed at that point, are they actually safe for them to be doing at that age? And even with things like point shoes, like making sure that the growth plates are where they need to be before they're getting up, and giving certain skill tests before requiring those students to do that, so that you're making sure that they're really developed and grown in the way that they need to. But the overstretching of the hips, I think, happens a lot, especially with more traditional teachers that maybe have danced professionally for a long, long time and came from even other countries, and classical training in these really high-level academies, but they may have not had the research and understanding of the anatomy that goes along with it, the dance science that goes along with it, and the advancements that we've made in those fields in the last even 20 years have been astounding. And I think there's a lot of training still that is stuck in, well, this is the way we always did it before. And this, ballet has been around since the 1600s. I mean, so obviously you don't want to continue doing the same thing that's been done since then, because now we know more about injuries and science and the way that things work, and things that have to shift. I mean, certain things like we were always told, keep your hips straight when you take a leg to the back in arabesque and you lift that leg. Keep your hips aligned. Well, there's only a certain point that you can get to where the leg will not go any higher.
Structure will allow you to.
Yes. And so you have to allow the hips and the pelvis to tilt. But we've been so ingrained by our previous teachers for years to say, don't move the hips, don't move the hips. And so it almost gets this feeling of feeling stuck. Well, how do you move when you're feeling stuck? And so this like push-pull against how we naturally move as human beings. So even in my ballet classes, modern classes, I really talk a lot about you're a human first. That comes first. So how do we move as a human being and then apply the technique that we want to apply? And so how do we move as humans? What is our actual range of motion in this hip that is normal? And then how do we move through that and try to work to get the best range of motion that is actually there without forcing something and trying to injure something to make it get further than we think it should be. So I don't know if that makes sense. I feel like I was talking in circles, but
here's the thing. By the way, you missed your calling to be in our field. I'm just letting you know. I mean, you talked about it.
Maybe it's my next career.
No, you don't know. And I would say that that's massive. And even our profession, the way it's evolved, like things that there's people still doing things from back in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so antiquated that we just know it doesn't work anymore. So the advancements in how we even look at the human body have changed over the last 100 years too. So to your point, and what you also mentioned something I wanted to address too, which is overtraining.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a common issue among sports of all kinds for a lot of young athletes. And it's really sad for me as a clinician and also the father of two kids, where I see these kids where they can be. And because they are being overtrained for one reason or another, and they're in multiple different sports all year round, there's not a time for the growing skeleton to really not only quote unquote mature in the right way, but also to heal and recover between sessions. And I've heard this from on our other podcast episodes. We've had other coaches from other countries come on say that I have never seen anything like this, where there's so much of an emphasis on getting to this very high caliber level very, very quickly, and to have a lot of training and whatnot from a very young age, where it ends up being that these kids can't make it very far because they're hampered by injuries.
Or they're burnt
out. Exactly.
They don't want to do it anymore.
Because that happened to dancers too, I'm sure.
Yes.
It's too bad.
And it's really sad because you see these dancers that are just so amazing. They're intelligent dancers. They're beautiful and they have so much talent, but they don't want to do it anymore. They're like, I just want to be a normal kid. And that's where I have my own children dancing. That's really, really important at that studio. And that's one of the reasons we love it so much. They're very adamant about kids need to be kids. They need to go to their school football games. They need to go to their school proms. They need to be involved in clubs and after school sports. And, it's really one of the few dance studios around this area that really looks at them being a whole person and will allow them to do those outside things. So many of them are, you're ours 5 days a week and you can't do any of these other things. You can't miss for a school chorus concert or whatever it might be. So these kids are missing out on things at their schools because they're so involved in their extracurricular activity. And that's the one thing I well, not the one thing, but that is one reason we really love their teachers and their trainers, because they believe in family. They believe in them being a kid, being able to do their things at their school, being active participants in their community, and that's going to make them a more intelligent dancer and mover because they have all of those things to then offer. I had a professor, Alonzo King, is a very famous teacher in California. He has a ballet company, and he was one of my grad school professors. And And I would apologize every day after class because I had been through my foot injury. I didn't think I danced as well as I used to. I thought I was old and, over my career.
Oh no.
But I was in school to be a choreographer, and I was like, okay, but I'm in your classes and I can't keep up. I'm so sorry that I'm not dancing at the level that I think you would expect me to dance at. And he talked to me for a long time and said, why do you think that? And kind of got to the root of it. He said, but you have so much more to offer your dancing and your performance quality now that you've lived through that experience than you did before. And that is what we want to see. And he talked about dancing honesty and dancing beauty, which is not pretty. Beauty is truth and honesty. And so how do you share that? And it might not be that your leg is up to here and you do 15 million turns, right? It's in the quality of your movement and the story that you're trying to tell. And that is really what's important in communicating as dancers. And so that kind of has stuck with me, that's what's important for these young dancers to know, that these lived experiences are going to be what's so important in your storytelling and in your movement, because dance is about communication. And so if you don't have those life opportunities and experiences, then what are you dancing about?
Becomes very rote at some point then.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's too bad.
Yeah.
Would you say then, Sayward, that as far as sharing that advice with young dancers, that we have to make sure that they have this bigger scope of what they are shooting for, but making sure along the way that they're living life?
Yes, I think that's very, very important. And it's something that I talk about in all of my classes, no matter what ages I'm teaching. I talk about relating what we're doing in the class to real life and real life experiences that I'll bring in. I do have my dancers talk and share. I try to have them build relationships throughout the class as well. So it's not just them standing at a bar doing movement by themselves with 30 other people around them.
Yeah.
But that it's really about that community and shared space. And that's really what is important. So I think they understand that those life experiences are going to be what is important as a dancer, but as a human being. And that gives us something to then dance about or create something about those experiences.
Powerful. That's beautifully said, by the way. As you have matured as a dancer now, Sayward, obviously you're busy running around with your own kids, and you're married and have a really great family, by the way. How have you been able to balance your own dance or your own health along the way while having so many things to tend to?
Yeah, it is tricky.
Very.
So I have taught at several universities across the state, full-time faculty, adjunct, guest teaching here and there, and sometimes many different places at one time. So I'm driving a lot in between places. I guest teach at high schools and local studios and various places. So it's definitely something that I have to take into account. Don't say yes to everything and really look at how much time is this going to actually take. It's not just about showing up to do the class, but remembering to put into my calendar the planning time that is required for those things too. I had to learn that as well at my previous job at the Department of Public Instruction, because we gave so many webinars and professional development sessions that we would want to book up all of our time with these amazing sessions. But then we'd have to remember we need time to research and we need time to plan and we need time to create the materials. And so I really had to learn to start booking my time for all of those things, which helps me with time management as well, to say, here's 2 hours that I'm going to block off to look at this. And I put it in my schedule. This is what I'm going to be doing during that time. And I even put in things like lunch or giving myself time to stretch. I try to stretch every day, even if it's mostly laying on the floor in constructive rest position. Try to make sure that my spine is lengthening out. But I feel that that's something that I know if I'm not doing that, my injuries start to creep up. And so I have had to learn, put it into my schedule, make sure that it's being done every day, whether it's morning or night. My kids know, like, if the TV is on, then I'm on the floor. And that's just, a habit that we've created. And now my kids have started doing those things and seeing those things as well, and knowing when they need to take a break instead of just taking advantage of everything possible, saying, I think my body needs to rest today. And I think setting that example for them has been really important too. Listening to my body when I know there's certain signs that the injuries are wanting to creep up, and saying, it's telling me I need to slow down a bit. I need to back off here. And I think those are the most important things. Even small things like when I'm driving for a long time, doing little exercises like pelvic tilts while I'm driving, or little neck exercises, so that when I get out of the car, I actually feel better. And so, kind of little tricks like that to just pay attention and check in with the body. Throughout all of my classes, I start class, how's everyone feeling? Where are you sore? Where are you hurting? What feels limited today? Teaching them to check in with their body all the time instead of jumping right into it, making even 1 minute to acknowledge, this feels a little stuck today. Let's work on this. And I think that's important to learn over the years, but to do every day, whether you're dancing, whether you're running, no matter what it is that if you're getting up and just playing with your kids, still paying attention to, what am I feeling today, and what do I need to just be aware of and have in the back of my mind.
It's powerful. And I think that for clients who say they don't have time, I think Sayward is a great example where you have to pre-plan this and make sure it's part of your routine. And I know that life gets very busy, but if we don't prioritize ourselves, we can't be the best we can be for the people we love.
Right.
And that's the bottom line of why we try to help people understand that we're not trying to give you these exercises because we want to annoy you. They're really supposed to help you get better at life. So hopefully if you're listening to this, you will also take your PT exercises more seriously, so that you can live life better. Sayward, before we end the show, I wanted to know from you, you've had so many experiences in physical therapy as a dancer over the years. What's some advice that people out there, especially dancers, what's some advice you can give to them as far as picking the right PT for them?
So for me personally, I have really loved when I have someone that's more individualized and hands-on, really doing a lot of the body work as well, even with dry needling, and has a varied approach. I've been to some that I would just come in, they would give me a list of exercises and tell me to do them while they go work with someone else. And that to me was really hard for me to get motivated to be in a space like that, because I would feel like I was just going to a gym.
Yes.
And I needed somebody to really talk to and talk through it and kind of get to the root of like brainstorming. Is this why this is happening? Because I want to ask a lot of questions and investigate and know those things. So really having somebody that I can communicate with like that, and that can be really hands-on and show me, this is where this is coming from, or this is why this is happening, and this is how we can fix it, really educates me and makes me feel more empowered in my and like I have an actual hand in my own healing, rather than just, okay, why am I doing these exercises? I don't know what they're for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's great advice. Anything that the audience should know about how Next Level has been different for you than other PT places you've been to?
Yeah, it has definitely been that communication, relationship kind of building that I think is really, really important. I mean, I'm here 2 or 3 days a week at this point. My kids have come with me. Some of my dogs have come with me. I mean, it's like,
It's part of your family.
yes, my 6-year-old, if I say I'm going to PT, she's like, oh, can I come too?
Oh my God. That's so cute.
Yeah, because she knows like, oh, hey, I can come. And my oldest will come and ask questions as well and learn while she's watching and kind of investigate also. And she's also a dancer. So that's been really good for her to kind of see that as a positive experience, because she had previously had PT for a different issue when she was younger and did not have a great experience. And so she had associated it with, oh no, it's like going to the doctor, or oh, I don't want to go to PT, don't make me go do that. But now she associates it with, this is a positive place, a great place to be, where you can laugh and joke, but also talk about serious stuff at the same time and feel comfortable. I mean, there's definitely, this place has seen me through a lot in the last 6 months. Even the death of my father, and I was in here the day that happened. So it's been, it's definitely been a place where I can work on healing, but also feel like I can talk to somebody and have someone to communicate, because there is so much related to your emotions and the things that you're going through with the trauma and your body and healing. And so I think it's really important to have a place that you can feel comfortable talking about those things as well.
Absolutely. I think we talked about this during one of our sessions where it's, we've had clients in the past where they've held on to such emotional trauma for so many years that we will work on certain areas and all of a sudden they have an emotional release. And it might at first seem confusing for therapists out there, but it happens more often than you think. And looking at our body as a reservoir for emotional baggage sometimes. Really important to identify those things and to be able to communicate and ask the right questions in not a probing kind of way, but just enough to say, hey, listen, anything going on in your life that has been a part of you for such a long time. And then at that point, either identifying other resources for them, other people they can speak to so that they can really get to the bottom of why they're having these chronic issues over time.
Yeah, definitely. And this place has also been really great for me in knowing that it's important for continuous prevention of further injuries and just to keep up with that in order to be able to do the things that I want to do with teaching. So, even though I've got a main injury that I've been dealing with, it can shift and change from day to day. So some days I'm coming in with my hip, some days my neck, some days it's my foot. And it's just depending on what I've done. And the nature of dance teaching is you are doing different things every day. So you may have done something different in a combination that, oh, I did this weird thing yesterday that may have messed up my shoulder or whatever it may be. But it's important as teachers that you're aware that you're doing things differently than even as a performer, because you're demonstrating many times a day. You may not have warmed up the same way that your students have, but yet you're showing them a lot of different things, maybe multiple times on one side. So then you're off balance. Maybe you have many classes from 3-year-olds all the way up to college students throughout the day, and you're on your feet constantly without a break. So I worked a lot with different districts around the state in principals understanding if you're going to have a dance program at your school, you need to think about setting up those dance teachers for the best success that they can have. And that's going to be different from your math teachers, for your language arts teachers, because these dancers, these teachers on their feet, they're physically doing something all day long. Whereas even a PE teacher might coach or lead their students, but they're not playing football out there with them constantly, right? The dance teachers are, and they're also directing shows, and they're having to be artistically creating things at the same time as physically doing things. And so they have to have both sides of their brains and their bodies working constantly. So they tend to get burnt out or injured a lot faster. And that's why it's hard to keep those programs or to keep teachers in those programs, because they can't sustain if the practice and their teaching schedule and their space is not set up for them to be safe.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing that. It definitely is a very taxing job and profession for the dancers out there. Sayward, is there any last minute advice you want to give to any of the young dancers or any two dancers who are looking to get to your level of achievement over time, or how they can reach you too?
Yeah. So I feel like dancers need to know at the young age, high school, even going into college, they want to major in dance, but they're like, what in the world am I going to do with this? That there are so many possibilities out there as a dance major to, yes, perform or choreograph or run a school or run a company, but also to do other fields because of the training that you get as a dancer, to be so organized and be a great planner, but to be an educator, to be a physical therapist, to be a dance therapist, dance movement therapist. There's so many things out there. I mean, I never thought that I would work for the state government being a dance major, right? But I was able to work on writing policy and work with teachers and embassies in other countries. And there's just so many amazing opportunities that I've had being a dance educator that I did not realize were even possible. And so I encourage them to think outside the box and to not feel like they have one path and that's the only path they're willing to take, but be willing to kind of expand their horizons and know that there are plenty of other connections that dance can take you into.
That's powerful. If people want to reach you out there who have a dance background and curious to maybe get some consultation from you or whatnot, how can they reach you?
My email is saywardgrindley@gmail.com. That's the best way to reach me, but you can also find me on Instagram or Facebook. And yeah, I'm always open for consultation, for guest teaching, working with teachers, professional development, and even working one-on-one private lessons with students or adults. Even if I have some adults that just want to work on feeling better in their own body, feeling more comfortable. And they're like, I was not a dancer growing up, but I just want to feel better about myself. And those are things that I can do as well.
I love that. I will have that information in our show notes. Sayward, thank you so much for coming on the show. I learned a lot more about you, just how good you are, what you do.
Thank you.
And so I'm excited to share that knowledge with our audience. So thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for tuning into today's episode. It really does mean a lot to us. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, or comment if you got at least one or two helpful insights or takeaways to help you get to your next level.